From the Millersville University Weather Center, this is student meteorologist Gabe Keller.
And student meteorologist Tali Deutsch.
And we're here with Weather Watch. And well, Tali, we have a lot to talk about as Hurricane Milton gets ready to make landfall. We're dealing with all kinds of hazards, including storm surge, flooding, and even tornadoes. So let's jump right into it.
So looking at this model, as we know, Hurricane Milton used to be a Category 5 and has weakened to a Category 3. And by the time it makes landfall, we expect it to be a Category 2. So this is the infrared model, and you can see how the eye is not very evident anymore, and it's starting to diminish. And now going on to rainfall, you can see here by the color, so as it goes straight through Tampa, the dark red, you can get up to 20 inches of rain, and the lighter red is 16, and pretty much the entire middle of Florida is going to get some sort of rain. It ranges from about 2 inches all the way up to 20. And then looking at the flash flood warning, you can see here that in the very middle of Florida is going to be very high chance of having flash flood, at least 70%, and then it weakens from there, but still entirety of Florida is going to get some sort of rain, some sort of flash flooding. And then on to storm surge, which is very deadly, and we should take this very seriously. This is there we go. For the peak storm surge, this is really important to stay aware of. As you see in this purple area right here, right outside Tampa Bay, it's going to be 9 to 13 feet of storm surge, which is crazy. That is super high, and you really want to stay away from the coast. If you live in Florida and live around this area and haven't evacuated already,
it'd be a good idea to stay away from the coast.
Stay away. And as you see from where it starts with this purple, then we have the reds, which is up to 12 feet, which is still very high. Stay away from the coast. And then we also have on the east coast, where it pretty much cuts through the storm. It goes pretty much right here is how it's expected. You have this yellow area, which just because you're on the east, you're not fully safe of this. Yes, you're more likely to get hit with a higher storm surge on the west coast, but the east coast is still going to get up to 6 feet of storm surge, and then up into Georgia and South Carolina, and down here in the Keys, you can have up to 3 feet of storm surge.
Very important. 9 to 13 feet of storm surge is nothing to play around with. Most first stories of houses on level ground at sea level will be almost completely underwater at that point. So make sure you are on higher ground if you haven't evacuated already.
And looking at this map, and I'm very sorry we can't make it bigger, but right here we have this purple. That's where the hurricane watch is. Obviously, we know the hurricane's going to hit here at this point. This darker pink color, you have the tropical storm warning, and then the tornado warning, which Gabe is going to talk more about later. There's going to be a lot of tornadoes. There's already been a lot of tornadoes. Do you know how many we've had already?
I don't know the exact number, but I'd say it's upwards of 20. And as Tali mentioned earlier, the purple is the storm surge warnings up through here. Surrounded in the pink are the hurricane warnings. We have this special marine warning over the lake here has been in place all day. There have been kind of these training supercells just moving over that are producing water spouts and all kinds of damaging wind gusts. And then a huge flash flood warning right through the middle of Florida for all that rain. I believe up to 2 to 4 inches of rain has already fallen, and as Tali mentioned earlier, some areas could receive upwards of 20 inches of rain. So I would not be surprised to see those upgraded to flash flood emergencies here as we move into the evening and Milton comes closer to actually making landfall.
And we believe Milton's going to hit land around 10 p.m.
Yeah, 10 p.m. Eastern time, yeah. And then, okay, so as Tali mentioned, we have been dealing with a lot of tornadoes today with this system. So I want to pull up what we call the War on Forecast system. This is from the National Severe Storms Laboratory. And I want to pull up this parameter. It's called the Significant Tornado Parameter. It's a composite viewer. And so basically what we're looking at is these white areas. Anything where you get red upwards of white is where you're going to have the biggest tornado potential. And as we move forward in time, you can see it's sort of moving up to the north as Milton gets closer. That's because you're getting that warm, moist air. The center of the hurricane is going to be over here. So what's going to happen is you're going to get this southerly flow that's coming off the Atlantic Ocean and Gulf of Mexico, and that is pulling in that warm, moist air, which is very favorable for tornadic environments. And when you have the center of such a strong low-pressure system so close, you're going to get a lot of wind shear. That's turning of the winds with height, and that's going to create a favorable environment for tornadoes where you have those overlap. So I'm going to pull up a sounding from the east side of Florida to show you exactly what we're working with here. And while that loads, I'm going to pop over here to the radar, and you could pretty much see every one of these storms. I mean, you're looking at supercells here, another supercell here. Pretty much all of these where you see this kind of hook shape, these are all supercells, and a lot of these storms, some of the ones that have gone up here, produced tornadoes earlier in the day. The first tornadoes were on the ground as early as, I believe, 10 a.m. this morning, and it's kind of been nonstop ever since. If we take a look at this map, this is all the tornado warnings that have been in effect today, and you can see it's a lot. I believe we're well over 50 tornado warnings, maybe even over 60 now. Several of them have been what we call particularly dangerous situation tornado warnings, which is where they have video or radar confirmation that a large and extremely dangerous or destructive tornado is on the ground at that time. So I'm going to bring it back over to the sounding viewer here. And as you can see, you're looking at these really long photographs, and anytime you have it where it kind of looks like a sickle like this, that indicates an extreme amount of wind shear, and that is good for tornadoes. And if you come down to the Cape values, this is our instability. You can see about 1,800 in the mixed layer, 2,300 at the surface. That is more than enough when you have wind shear like this. And if you look at this is what we call storm relative helicity. You can see 1 kilometer, it's up over 350, and you really only need the 1 kilometer value to be 100. So this is about 3 times what's actually needed to create tornadoes. And then if you look at the 3 kilometer, that's up to 400. You want this to be about 250. That's when you start talking about tornado formation. And as we go forward in time, you can see that environment really just kind of sticks around. And if we go back to the radar and play the loop, you can see that these storms are moving north, and they're just going to continue moving north through this environment. And it's going to be like this is one band of supercells. There was another band earlier that has moved north out of the warm sector and has since dissipated and become more of that stratiform rain that you see up here. And as we go forward through the day, you're going to see more bands of supercells start to develop to the south and push on north. We're not exactly sure how many more there will be. Once the sun goes down, it'll be a little bit harder for the storms to produce tornadoes with that loss of daytime heating and thus loss of instability. But you're still going to have this very favorable amount of wind shear, pretty much any grid point up through here. And you can see as this happens, as the low moves closer, it just kind of moves northward. And there's going to be those storms that just pull forward throughout that time. And if we can show you, so this is what we call a paintball viewer. This is basically showing radar values of over 40 dBz, or where we would consider the orange and red reflectivities on your weather radar. So you can see how these are all pretty much supercells right here. Here's a band of supercells. They're just going to lift forward through that environment, and it's just going to keep on coming. And eventually, once it gets dark, you can see we kind of run out of bands to pump through that environment. So hopefully, as the sun goes down, that tornado threat will diminish. Unfortunately, some populated areas have been hit by tornadoes today, including Fort Myers, where it looks like there was some damage. I haven't heard anything about any injuries or anything at this point, so that's a good thing. But you can, again, going back to the map, you can see pretty much all through Florida, you've had tornado warnings, and a lot of these storms have produced tornadoes. So that is one thing, other than the storm surge, which is obviously a big deal on the west coast of Florida. As you go further east, you're not out of the woods. And the other thing that's really important to note, when you look at the cone, we always say that hazards can occur outside the cone. And you can see a bunch of tornadoes have happened down in this region, which is well outside of the cone. So you're not just dealing with the hurricane force winds or the storm surge. You also have to watch out for tornadoes, and some of which could be very strong tornadoes as well. We've seen quarter-mile wide wedge tornadoes actually today as well. And the last thing I would like to talk about is this multi-model diagnostic comparison. This 0Z 10 October is in about 3 hours from now. So this is kind of the forecasted intensity. You can see it is expected to rapidly weaken as it approaches land. And like we said, we're expecting it to be a Category 2. And you can see why here. So originally, Hurricane Milton was not dealing with too much deep layer shear. But as we're moving forward in time, that shear is spiking. And shear is not good for hurricanes in most cases. So that's going to kind of rip it apart and make it very hard for it to sustain itself as a strong hurricane. And you can see this gap in sea surface temperatures here. That's where it's going to be over land. And as we know, hurricanes weaken over land with the loss of energy that they can pull from the ocean. So that's going to be another reason why it weakens. And then the other thing is, over time, the mid-level relative humidity was up to 80%, which is really, really good. That's about what we saw with Hurricane Helene as it approached and made landfall. But you can see it slowly dropped with time as Hurricane Milton has started pulling in the dry air from the continental United States. and it's going to drop just above 40%. Looks like it already has. This is about where we are now. So that's another reason why it's began to weaken. And the other thing is, as Tali mentioned earlier, just how big it is.
It's so big.
Yeah, yesterday about this time, it was a much smaller, much more
Do we have
compact
that?
storm. I don't know. Let's see here. I could pull up the wind field.
Yeah.
The wind field would be good.
You
So
can see how small it started and how it just
Yeah.
rapidly intensified, even
Yeah.
though it was moving very slow.
yeah, so another thing with hurricanes is how small it was actually aided in its strengthening, because when you get a really tiny, compact, low pressure system, you get a bigger pressure gradient, and wind blows around a pressure gradient. And when you get a stronger pressure gradient or a bigger pressure or a bigger change in pressure, that creates stronger winds. And that's part of the reason why Hurricane Milton was able to strengthen so rapidly, is because of just how small it was. But now that it's kind of blown up a little bit more, it's a weaker pressure gradient, and it's not as low of a pressure as it was before. So now it's weakening, the winds aren't blowing as fast around it, and we're going to be down to likely a Category 2 as we approach landfall.
And then looking, since we were talking about the winds, looking at the predicted wind speeds and everything, as you see, very strong. This is our cone path, and you can just see how around pretty much the middle of Florida we have this purple area, which is going to give,
That's going to be, so wherever that is, you're pretty much guaranteed to see tropical
Yeah.
storm force winds in that area, which is 1 minute average of greater than 39 miles per hour.
Mhm.
So it's important to note that while it's going to be sustained like that, you could have gusts even higher.
And then for the time wise of it, this is also just an estimation, and we have Wednesday at 2 p.m., which is already passed, and they've already been hit with this. And then in about 3 hours, we have Wednesday at 8 p.m., where the winds are just going to be, you're going to feel it all through Florida.
Yeah, so yeah, 8 p.m. is about when the east coast of Florida can expect those tropical force winds to arrive. Or actually, I'm sorry, that's the earliest reasonable arrival time. And if we pan over to the most likely, it could be even a little bit later. This is about Thursday at 2 a.m. Pretty much all of this area of Florida will be seeing tropical storm
But
force
pretty
winds.
much all through the night, it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. As it moves through central Florida and eventually off into the Atlantic, where it will stay away. We hope that everyone is evacuated, especially around the Tampa area, Fort Myers. That storm surge is no joke. I'm 6'4", so anything 9 to 13 feet, that's almost
That's big.
almost 2 of me. So that's unsurvivable. It's going to be fast rushing water, and with the winds, it's not just going to be a calm little stream of water. You're going to be dealing with white caps on land with the winds, and you don't know what's in that water. You could be having broken glass, debris, chemicals, really anything you can think of. It could be in that water. So it's a really bad situation, and you want to stay out of it if you can.
So I think that's all. Everyone, if you were around Tampa or anywhere down south, please stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so that'll do it from us. If you know anyone who's there, please check in on them. Make sure that they have everything that they need, and stay safe.